Discover 3 spine-chilling true stories with terrifying photos that expose sinister secrets. Jenna had always thought Oakwood Heights was the perfect place to raise her kids. The bubble of predictability around her life felt comfortable until the day she found a folded note stuffed against her car window. "I see your kids play every day. They're so cute," it read, simple yet sinister. It jolted her, sending icy fingers down her spine. Was this a prank? A joke from the teenagers who roamed the neighborhood? She dismissed it, but a nagging unease settled in her gut. Days passed, each one punctuated by the arrival of similar notes. Some mentioned her favorite coffee shop, while others included precise details about her children's soccer practices. Each discovery was another crack in her once serene world. She lay awake, heart racing, straining to hear every creak of the old house, convinced someone lurked just beyond the curtains. The scratching noises outside at night mocked her sanity, wrapping her in a quilt of dread. When she stumbled upon grainy photographs of her children playing in the yard snapped without her awareness, the world began to close in around her. She whispered her fears to the heavy silence. The once friendly faces of her neighbors morphed into shadows of suspicion. Mr. Carter, the seemingly nice old man next door who always offered helpful advice, smelled like trouble. And when she tried to report these incidents to local authorities, the dismissive attitudes only deepened her isolation. Probably just a prank, they laughed, brushing her off like dust from their shoulders. Each laugh echoed in her ears like a haunting bell tolling. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Jenna felt the walls closing in. The anxiety was suffocating. One evening, drained and trembling, she decided to confront the escalating terror. With each pounding heartbeat, she slipped outside, scanning the dimly lit street. Shadows loomed like monsters, draping the neighborhood in a false sense of safety. It was then she saw him, Mr. Carter, lurking in his yard, his face cloaked in shadows. The glint of a camera flickered as he darted behind a tree. Panic surged and instinct kicked in. She sprinted back inside, fumbling for her phone, fingers slick with sweat. Would anyone believe her? What if she was the punchline in someone's twisted game? Memories came rushing back, a story her grandmother told her about a figure that vanished years ago, preying on families. Was Mr. Carter part of that legend? Did he know something she didn't? As dread dripped like cold rain through her thoughts, a flicker of light from Mr. Carter's yard caught her eye. The sight sent her heart plummeting. A shrine? Her children's photos laid out, encircled by red candles. Each picture, once a symbol of joy, now glared back at her, sending a shock of horror through her veins. The true fear settled into her bones. How little she truly knew the predator lurking in her own community, and how fragile safety could really be. Jenna's heart raced like a caged animal, pounding hard against her ribs as she stood frozen in her kitchen. The glow of her phone lighting her trembling hands. The shrine, her children's radiant smiles flickering in the candlelight, stared back at her, taunting her every thought. She steadied herself against the countertop, taking deep breaths, her mind a whirlwind of agony and dread. What was she supposed to do? Call the police again, only to have them laugh it off? The smell of melting wax filled the air, overwhelming. She could feel paranoia seep into her skin. The notes, the photographs, they all pointed to one chilling truth. Someone had been watching her. The thought dragged her through a bleak tunnel of despair. Jenna grabbed her phone, fingers flying over the screen, as she tried to capture a photo of the horrifying scene outside. But by the time she peeked out the window again, the candles flickered out, plunging everything into the dark. Was it just her fear playing tricks? Or had Mr. Carter been there all along, watching her? In a decision fueled by terror, Jenna slipped on her shoes. She strode to the door, pulse hammering in her ears like war drums. She couldn't stay locked up anymore. This fear had morphed into a relentless beast, and it demanded action. She crept out, her footsteps muffled by the looming shadows. The night air felt thick and heavy, wrapping around her throat like a vice. As she ventured into the dark, every noise felt amplified: the rustle of leaves, the distant bark of a dog, the soft thud of her heart resounding like a warning bell. Peering into Mr. Carter's yard, she strained her eyes to see, but the darkness seemed to swallow all. Had he left? Or was he lurking, waiting like a spider in its web? Fear whispered sinister doubts in her ear. What if he knew she'd found the shrine? What if he was waiting for another moment to make a move? Then, out of the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse. A flicker of movement by his back porch, a shadow flitting past the dim light. With her breath caught in her throat, Jenna carefully approached, each step a foolish yet desperate endeavor. "Mr. Carter," she called, her voice barely above a whisper. No answer. The oppressive silence was suffocating. She took a few more steps and then saw it: a heap of fabric, something large thrown carelessly against the old fence. A chill ran down her spine. What was it? She dared to step closer, heart hammering hard in her chest. As she inched forward, she could see a face peering out from the darkness, pale and unblinking. "Help me," it whispered, the voice raspy and broken. Jenna stumbled back, gasping. The voice belonged to a child, a little boy with wild hair and wide, terrified eyes, his small frame trembling as if caught in a storm. "Where did you come from?" she breathed, desperate. "Are you okay?" Before he could respond, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed behind her, thudding against the ground like the drumroll before a tragic ending. Jenna turned slowly, dread rising like bile in her throat. "Jenna." Mr. Carter's voice rumbled from the shadows, cold and clear. "What are you doing here?" The finality in his question hung heavy in the air, sharp and dangerous. In that moment, she realized the web was closing and there was no escape from this relentless nightmare. "What will you do now?" she thought, adrenaline coursing through her veins, readying her for whatever was coming. And before she could form a response, darkness swallowed everything. The sound of Mr. Carter's voice reverberated through the stillness, wrapping around Jenna like a shroud. The child's wide eyes bore into her, pleading. This was a moment suspended in horror, a fragile thread connecting her indecision with chilling dread. She had to make a choice. "Please," the boy whimpered, clutching the fabric tightly around him. "Help me." Jenna shifted, trapped between urgency and fear. What kind of help could she offer him? The boy's face resonated with a strange familiarity, but in the dark, she couldn't figure it out. Did he belong to Mr. Carter? Where had he come from? Every possible answer felt like another knot in her stomach, suffocating her. "Stay here," she whispered to him, half to comfort herself as she turned to face Mr. Carter. The shadows shifted, the movement of his tall frame slicing through the darkness. "You shouldn't have come here, Jenna," he said slowly, each word like poison dripping from his lips. "This isn't a game. You have no idea what you're messing with." Jenna's thoughts raced. Was he threatening her? Did he know about the shrine? She fought the urge to flee, forcing herself to take a step back toward the boy. "Let him go. He shouldn't be here." Carter chuckled, low and unsettling, as if the tension brought him some twisted pleasure. "You think he is scared of me? There's something far worse lurking out there. You're in too deep." Her heart leapt into her throat. "What do you mean? What is out there?" In that moment, the shadows seemed to swirl, forming shapes, whispering with a voice only she could hear. A chill swept over her, that primal fear clawing at her sanity. The boy's face, illuminated by the faint glimmer spilling from the porch light, turned an ashen shade. "Don't," he whimpered, trembling closer to the ground as if trying to hide from something unseen. "Shut up," Carter snapped, the anger in his voice cutting like glass. "You'll bring it here." All the fragmented pieces of goodness in Jenna screamed for her to protect this child, but the mounting pressure threatened to drown her. "Bring what? Just tell me." Something moved in the depths of the night, a rustle in the bushes that was not the wind, a slithering noise like nails scraping against metal. Jenna's breath caught. She felt Mr. Carter's eyes boring into her, a predator that savored the fear radiating from her. "Something you can't comprehend," he said, his tone shifting to a conspiratorial whisper. "They don't like the lights." The boy trembled harder. "Yes, coming. Yes, coming." Jenna's body surged with instinct. She would not let another child suffer whatever darkness loomed just beyond the thin veil of her reality. She reached for the boy, but as her fingers grazed his shoulder, a sharp sound pierced the silence, the creaking of a door. The back porch swung open abruptly, revealing a maw of darkened emptiness. Jenna's blood ran cold. She looked at Mr. Carter, whose expression was stone cold, devoid of humanity. "Run!" he shouted suddenly, urgency slicing through the tension. Jenna didn't hesitate. She grabbed the boy's hand, and together they bolted toward the street, heartbeats pounding in unison, driving them away from the shadows. Behind them, the ground trembled with a terrible force the darkness had awakened. As they reached the edge of the street, Jenna glanced back. The night had become alive with movement, shadows shifting and elongating, swirling together as if holding a sinister counsel. "Where do we go?" the boy gasped, eyes wide with terror. But Jenna had no answers, no safety net, just the gnawing menace of Carter's warning echoing in her mind. "Anywhere but here," she whispered, her voice breaking. But the question loomed in her heart: what truly chased them into the night? And as they fled, Jenna felt a chill crawling up her spine. She wasn't just running from a man. Something was coming for them both. Anything could happen. What would she do when the darkness finally caught up? The air was thick with desperation as Jenna and the boy sprinted down the street, each step pushing them further away from the looming darkness of Mr. Carter's porch. The dim streetlights flickered overhead, their weak glow barely penetrating the veil of night, and Jenna felt the weight of the shadows pressing in on them. "Where are we going?" the boy gasped, his voice a whisper tinged with panic. "Stay close," Jenna answered, her voice trembling. The street felt endless, becoming a surreal landscape of dread. The boy's grip tightened around her fingers, and she could feel the sweat glistening on his small palm. They darted around the corner, heart racing, and skidded to a halt. The silence of the night deepened around them, but it was the unnatural stillness that sent a jolt of fear through Jenna. She glanced over her shoulder. Behind them, the shadows seemed to pulse and breathe, the darkness thickening like a living entity. What was out there?" the boy stammered, eyes darting wildly. Jenna didn't want to answer. She felt it too, that indescribable presence creeping up behind them, urging her to run even faster. "Just keep moving," she hissed, pushing the boy forward. They stumbled through the alley, the horrid stench of dampness and decay wrapping around them like a noose as they rounded a bend that led into a vacant parking lot. The sound of something scraping against ground echoed behind them, a low, dragging noise, like a heavy chain. "What is it?" the boy cried, his voice wobbling with fear. She turned, desperately scanning the darkness. "I don't know." The shadows shifted closer, the air vibrating with a malevolent energy. Jenna's heart thundered in her chest. The silence had transformed into a menacing hum that seemed to resonate with her own fear. "We need to." Before she could finish, a sudden crash erupted from the other side of the parking lot. Jenna's eyes widened as she caught a glimpse of movement, a hulking shadow that loomed against the sparse light, twisting and contorting as if it were alive. Jenna grabbed the boy and sprinted toward the nearest exit, praying it wouldn't take long. But the thing moved oddly, crawling with a speed that sent a chill down her spine, and she could feel it bearing down on them. "Jenna, look," the boy choked out, pointing at an abandoned car, its windows shattered, heat radiating from neglect. Without thinking, she grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the vehicle. "Get inside," she urged. They dove into the car, her heart leaping as she pressed them both into the footwell, trying to make themselves as small as possible. The boy trembled beside her, his breath quickening. "Is it gone?" Jenna held her breath, straining to listen. The darkness seemed to throb around them, a heartbeat connected to whatever was hunting them. They could hear the sound of heavy breathing, low and guttural, a sound that made her stomach churn. "Don't make a sound," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The weight of their fear wrapped around them like fog, the sound of movement drawing closer, the scraping noise now almost a whisper. Jenna felt the boy quaking beside her, and she wished she could erase the terror from his face. Then, just as abruptly as it had started, the breathing stopped. Silence fell like a curtain, leaving their hearts racing in the void. But before they could breathe fully again, a sharp tap echoed against the roof of the car. Eyes wide, Jenna looked at the boy. What was that? The tapping came again, methodical and slow, some force testing their hiding place. At that moment, Jenna understood the truth. They weren't safe. This was just the beginning. "Jenna," the boy whispered, his voice quaking with dread. "What? It's coming for us." Suddenly, the world outside shifted. Shadows ignited, revealing distorted shapes that twisted and writhed in the absence of light. "What do we do now?" Jenna's mind raced as panic clutched at her throat. She couldn't think of an escape. They were cornered, trapped in a dark thicket of despair, while the unseen terror outside continued to inch closer. And in that moment, she knew they were no longer just fleeing from the darkness. They were being hunted. The tapping continued, a slow, deliberate rhythm that seemed to mock their fear. Jenna's skin crawled as dread flooded her, making her fingers numb against the metal of the car's floor. Some vague notion whispered for her to look up, to see what lurked above their heads. But a primal terror held her back. Instead, she clenched her eyes shut, willing the darkness outside to vanish. "Jenna?" The boy's voice broke through the fog of her fear. "What do we do? What if it finds us?" I don't know." She didn't want to scare him further, but the truth gnawed at her like a ravenous beast. Their breaths felt too loud, the weight of the silence pressing down urger and heavy. Suddenly, the tapping stopped. The sudden absence of sound echoed in Jenna's ears, and her heart raced faster. Was it still there? Did it just pause to think? A rustling sound pierced the silence, making both of them jump. It came from behind the driver's seat. Unbeknownst to Jenna and the boy, something was moving around, probing the space beneath the vehicle. A low growl resonated, like guttural thunder rumbling from deep within a nightmare, sending shivers down their spines. The boy whimpered softly, and Jenna felt her chest constrict. "Just stay quiet." She whispered the words more like a prayer than a command. The growling grew into a series of low, menacing barks, inhuman, jerky. It morphed into a sound that made Jenna's stomach twist. The boy clutched her tightly, his small fingers digging into her arm, his breath warm with fear. Then there was a sudden crash above them, like metal buckling, followed by splintering glass. Panic surged through Jenna. Had it found a way in? Her heart pounded against her ribcage. "We need to get out of here," she hissed. But how? The car offered a deceptive sense of safety, yet they both knew it was a cage and something was getting in. The idea of emerging into the night made her belly churn. What waited for them out there? A shadow passed over the windshield, momentarily blotting out the dim streetlight. Jenna froze. She met the boy's terrified eyes, and they communicated a depth of understanding. This was not just about survival at that moment. It was about facing down a darkness that surrounded them, both in shadow and in spirit. "On 3, we move," she whispered, feeling the weight of her words. 1, 2. As she began the countdown, the shadow shifted again, its shape curling and twisting against the glass. The boy's mouth opened to scream, but Jenna clamped a hand over it. "Now!" she shouted, and they lunged. They scrambled out of the footwell, limbs flailing as they tumbled onto the cracked asphalt, breathless. Jenna's heart raced as they landed in a heap. She turned to look back, seeing only the gaping maw of the vehicle. The sounds of scratching clawed at her mind, escalating like a crescendo, but they were out now. They had to run. "Come on," she gasped, pulling the boy toward the nearest wall, their bodies squeezing against a cold, unyielding surface. But just as hope began to bloom within her chest, a deafening roar erupted behind them. The ground trembled beneath their feet, shaking the very essence of their resolve. The noise was accompanied by a rush of air that sent a shiver down Jenna's spine, and in an instant, their moment of scattered freedom morphed back into chaos. The shadows converged, and Jenna felt the unmistakable chill of terror creeping back into her bones. "Where do we go?" the boy cried, fear pitching his voice higher. But Jenna didn't have an answer. She spun around, searching for anything, perhaps an escape, perhaps any form of light. And then she saw it, a weak flickering beyond the alley, just beyond a thick curtain of despair. With desperation coursing through her veins, she cried, "The light! We run to the light!" As they barreled toward it, she felt the darkness snapping at their heels, and sheer panic propelled them forward. But what awaited them in the light was wholly unknown, an uncertainty wrapped in its glimmer that made her heart skip. "Jenna, I can't," the boy gasped, struggling to keep pace. "Just keep moving." They surged forward, but the shadows pressed closer, transforming into dark tendrils that reached out. Jenna's breath hitched, each frantic step echoing a hope that felt as treacherous as it was fleeting. And then, she stumbled. The boy barely caught himself, painfully dragging her back up as she realized they were too close to falling into the fray of shadows enveloping them. But in that moment, she heard a soft whisper in the darkness. It was a voice, calm yet haunting, weaving through the air like a ghost. "Come to me." Jenna's stomach dropped. The light flickered once more, but it felt like a siren-esque call, mesmerizing yet ominous. "Keep running," she screamed, feeling dread from every angle pulse in her chest. In those last split seconds, just before they reached the end of the alley, she realized the truth. The darkness had a voice, and it was calling to them. What lay at the end of that light? Could it be salvation? Or was it a trap waiting to claim them? Jenna's heart raced as she pushed forward, dragging the boy along. The flickering light ahead wavered, struggling against the relentless dark, but it called to her like a desperate plea. "We have to make it," she shouted, the urgency in her voice fueling her legs to run faster. But behind them, the darkness built momentum, stretching and surging like a wild animal hungry for prey. "Jenna!" The boy's voice broke through, panic in his tone. "What if we can't get there? We have to believe we can." Jenna's words felt thin, brittle under the weight of terror that followed them, but they drove her to keep going. The light blinked like a beacon, but doubt nagged at her. What if it was just an illusion? Then, the whisper came again, closer this time, like a caress in the deafening silence. "Come to me." Jenna hesitated, a part of her wanting to turn back, to dive into the shadows where it felt familiar. But she couldn't. Not with the boy holding her hand, his grip trembling with fear. They dashed toward the light, every step filled with dread and hope intermingling violently in her chest. The alley narrowed, walls closing in, shadows creeping like fingers behind them. Jenna risked a glance over her shoulder, and what she saw made her stomach lurch. The darkness had taken form. Whirls of smoke converged into a grotesque shape, twisting and contorting, eyes burning with an endless hunger. It was alive, pulsating, and it wanted them. "Faster," she urged, adrenaline spurring her on. They were so close now, just a few steps more. But as they surged toward the light, it flickered violently, flickering like a dying flame. Then the ground gave out beneath her feet. Jenna fell onto her knees, instinctively pulling the boy down with her. The asphalt cracked, splintering as a dark fissure opened up, swallowing the last remnants of safety. She gasped, scrambling to regain footing as the shadows spilled from the hole, surging toward them, hungry and insatiable. "Jenna, help!" the boy cried, panic-stricken. "Hold on," she yelled, grasping the boy's arm, her fingers slipping against his sweat-slick skin. The shadows writhed and twisted, threatening to wrap around them, to drag them down into the abyss. In a desperate effort, she launched herself toward the flickering light, but it dimmed again, its glow fading like a dream at dawn. The boy squeezed her hand, his eyes wide, pleading, sensing the threat rising from the darkness. "Don't leave me. I want tea," she shouted, pulling him closer. But the light flickered once more, and then darkness. A powerful gust of wind roared through the alley, snuffing out the last vestiges of the light. She felt the boy's grip tighten, felt the frigid chill of the shadows wrapping around them like a serpent coiling its prey. The whisper grew louder, now a cacophony echoing in her mind, full of despair. "Come to me." Jenna's breath quickened, the essence of dread closing in as she realized that they had nowhere to run. They were trapped between the suffocating darkness and the gaping chasm of their own fears. She could feel the cold creeping in, a heaviness that settled in her bones and weighed her down. "Jenna," the boy said softly, trembling. We need to fight it," she managed to say, heart beating with frantic desperation. The shadows pulsed, pressing closer. She could sense them reaching out, and just as everything seemed lost, there came a new sound, a loud crash reverberating through the darkness. For a split second, Jenna thought it was an echo of hope, but the shadows recoiled only to surge forward again, angrier, more violent. "Jenna, look!" the boy shouted, his voice breaking through the chaos. Jenna turned, instinctively pivoting toward the sound of a distant siren wailing in the night, a reminder that help existed somewhere, out there. A sliver of possibility sparked within her, igniting a beacon of determination. "Let us go," Jenna yelled, heart hammering. But as they stumbled forward, a sinister voice retched its last promise. "You cannot escape," and the chase renewed, now more frenzied as they sprinted forward, desperately praying the darkness would hold back just long enough. What would they encounter next? Was rescue truly on its way? Or was this merely another trick of the lurking shadows? Jenna could barely think, her mind swirling with fear and confusion. They pushed through the dark, the sounds of their breath heavy in the suffocating silence. The boy was right beside her, his footsteps a frantic rhythm that mirrored her own. Every now and then, a shiver of cold would race down her spine, as if the shadows were biting at her back, eager to drag her down. "Which way?" she gasped, glancing back. The darkness loomed large, stretching like a monstrous tide ready to swallow them whole. The siren's wail echoed hollowly, fading in and out like a cruel taunt. "Jenna!" the boy's voice broke through her frantic thoughts. "We can't just run blindly. Trust me," she shouted, heart hammering against her ribs. She could feel the panic rising in her throat. It threatened to choke her, but she pushed it down. "Focus, Jenna, just focus." Ahead, the light flickered again, a promise of safety or maybe just another cruel illusion. The shadows behind them seethed and writhed, their whispers growing sharper, an insistent chant now. "Come to me, you belong with us," she gritted her teeth, forcing her feet to move. If they could reach the light, maybe they'd find a way out. Maybe they'd discover what lay beyond these suffocating walls. But dread clung to her like a heavy fog, merging with the shadows that reached for her with black tendrils swaying and curling, desperate to catch her. "Jenna, stop!" The boy pulled at her hand, suddenly fading in energy. "I can't keep running like this." She turned to him, his face pale, eyes swimming with fear and exhaustion. Her heart twisted. "We can't stop. We have to keep going. Why are we running toward the light if it keeps going out?" His voice wobbled, each word a struggle. "I don't know. Maybe it's a way out." But even as she said it, her mind flooded with doubt. The shadows surged again, hissing with fury. This time they were faster. The dark mass poured from the ground, clawing at her heels, eager to pull them back into the void. "Jenna!" the boy screamed as he slipped, falling to his knees. She felt the tug of his hand weakening. "No!" she cried, reaching back to grab him. The shadows pulsed around them, closer now, a swirling tempest of black despair. Panic surged through her. She yanked him up with every ounce of strength she had left, fear whispering dark things into her ear. They stumbled forward, the flickering light growing nearer but never quite within their grasp. Then, as if mocking their efforts, the light flickered out one last time, plunging them into darkness. Jenna felt her stomach drop as the shadows lunged like a tidal wave. She and the boy collided with something hard. It felt cold and unyielding, the slickness of stone against her palms. She squinted into the pitch black, trying to figure out what they'd hit. Was it a wall or worse, a tomb? "We're trapped, Jenna." The boy whimpered, his voice shaking. "Please, what do we do?" The edges of her sanity frayed. A chilling laugh echoed through the confined space, reverberating against the walls. You think you can escape? You will join us in time. Jenna felt the boy shake beside her, fear consuming him. The cold almost felt tangible now, pressing in like the weight of despair. Listen, she said, breathing hard. We have to find a way out. There has to be something. She pushed against the stone, feeling along the surface as panic clawed at her mind. Her fingers brushed over cool metal. A latch, or a door. Please, Jenna, hurry. As she fumbled to make sense of the latch, a dark form loomed just behind them. Jenna's breath hitched, realization hitting her like a punch in the gut. This was no mere trick of the shadows. It was watching them, hungry and insatiable. Open, 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 Jenna hissed, desperately twisting the latch. But no sound would come. No escape was offered. Should she turn and fight? Or would that merely seal their fate? What if the darkness planned to keep them, to use them in its own sinister design? The whispers grew louder, pushing harder against her mind. Come to me, and then, the boy screamed. In that moment, Jenna's heart shattered. Was it already too late? The scream echoed in the dark, a piercing sound that sent terror crashing through Jenna's veins. She whirled around, instinctively pulling the boy close. The figure, and it was definitely a figure, shifted in the darkness, looming larger and more grotesque with each breath she took. Her heart raced, thumping as mightily as the roar of a freight train. The boy trembled, desperation etched across his face. It's coming for us, Jenna, he whimpered. Shut up, she hissed back, her voice trembling. Focus. If she could just get the latch to open, they might escape this nightmare. Her hands slid over the cold metal, feeling for any sign of life within it. A glimmer of hope. Behind her, shadows writhed with an unholy eagerness. You cannot run forever. The voice taunted, deep and sinister, coursing through the air like ice water. You will join us. Jenna's stomach twisted in revulsion. They had to get out. There had to be light out there, something that could swallow the dark hole. She guided her fingers blindly, feeling for any groove, any crack that would promise release. Please just hurry, the boy sobbed, each plea a raw edge of panic tearing through the tension. She could hear the shadows creeping closer, their whispers crawling along her skin. They were so close now, too close. With a surge of frantic energy, Jenna twisted at the latch once more. This time it gave. A sliver of hope crackled in her chest as she felt a click. The sudden thrill of impending escape hung in the air. But before she could pull the door open, the dark figure stepped closer. The stench of decay filled the small space. She gagged but pushed down her disgust. It was now or never. Jenna, it's right behind you, the boy screamed, and she felt the tremor of his voice shake like the ground beneath them. Jenna whipped around and faced the horror. The face was twisted, an amalgam of shadows and grinning malice, eyes alight with a knowing gleam. You can't hide from me, it crooned softly, its voice dripping with poison. She could feel its presence siphoning warmth from the air, encasing them both in a cocoon of dread. In a swift movement, Jenna turned back to the latch, yanking on it with all her strength. The darkness snarled, tendrils reaching out, grazing her skin like icy fingers. The door finally swung open with a squeal, but before they could escape, the shadows wrapped around her, anchoring her to her spot. Jenna! The boy grabbed her arm, fear blazing in his eyes. She could feel his warmth, but it was flickering like the light they had chased, nearly gone. Run! She yelled, desperation clawing at her throat. But the tendrils tightened, pulling her back. She could almost hear the whispers growing louder. Join us, join us. With a final violent tug, she tore free, lunging through the doorway. The boy followed, stumbling behind her as the darkness howled in fury. They burst into what looked like a deserted hallway, the faint glimmer of light flickering weakly at the far end. Breathing hard, Jenna glanced back in horror. The shadows were still there, inching toward them. The voice boomed, full of rage. You think you can escape? We are everywhere. They dashed down the corridor, heartbeats racing, breaths a frantic cadence. Jenna could feel each footfall reverberating against her ribs. We have to keep moving, she called out, fear and adrenaline fueling her every step. But now, the hallway seemed to stretch endlessly, taunting them both, the shadows coming alive. Where were they being led? As they ran, Jenna hesitated. A mural on the wall caught her eye, figures carved in the stone, faces twisted in agony, pleading for release. Was this a warning or a grave invitation? Just as they reached the end, a heavy door thudded before them, locking outside any chance of salvation. The whispers grew louder, pressing in like suffocating walls. Jenna, what do we do? The boy cried, his voice rising in terror. Her heart sank. They were lost in the dark, the shadows closing in faster. But beyond the door, she thought she heard something else too. A flicker of hope amid damning despair. Maybe it can be opened, she suggested, her fingers trembling against the cold surface. Could she tackle down this next barrier? What lay behind the door could either doom them or set them free. Was it worth the risk? But before she could make the choice, a dark figure slipped through the shadows behind them, its eyes fixed on them. The moment of truth was upon them. Would they be consumed by darkness or find the light they so desperately sought? Jenna pressed herself against the heavy door, her heart pounding like a war drum. The boy was beside her, wide-eyed, his fear spilling over into desperation. What if it hears us? He whispered, as shadows coiled tight around them, an unholy grip that made her skin crawl. Shoo, she hissed, clutching the doorknob. Felt ice-cold, like a grave marker. She could feel the whispers intensifying, circling them like vultures. They tangled in her hair, clawing at her sanity. The murmurs rose, hauntingly familiar, most echoed in the silence. Words twisted by malice. You will not escape. If she turned and faced it, would it consume her whole? The dark figure, still looming just out of sight, seemed to pulse and swell, feeding off their terror. It thrived on fear, each raspy breath they took fueling it further. I don't want to die, the boy cried, his voice rising unsteadily. What should we do? Jenna squeezed her eyes shut for just a second, wrestling with the enormity of their situation. We can't give in to it. We need to find a way out together. She took a breath, steadied herself, then turned the knob. Clicked but didn't budge. No, this could not be the end. She twisted harder, desperation surging through her veins. If she could just push it hard enough, they might break free. In that moment, the door trembled under a violent force from the other side, shaking on its hinges. The shadows were hitting it, merging into a dark wave, eager to swallow them whole. You're next, it roared, an echoing promise of agony. Jenna, the boy yelped, terror lacing his voice. Panic rocketed through her. She threw her shoulder against the door, the wood screaming in protest. But it held firm. The whispers grew frenetic, jackals desperate for their prey. Join us, I want tea. Jenna screamed. She stepped back, her mind racing for answers. They needed a distraction. Something to draw the attention away from them just for a moment. Back away, she barked, grabbing the boy's hand and pulling him toward a nearby alcove. It felt like a pit in her stomach as they ducked into the shadows, hiding from whatever loomed behind that door. She pressed her back against the cold stone wall, her heart racing. Suddenly, an idea jolted through her. There was an old fire alarm on the wall near the door. If they triggered it, the sound might confuse the darkness long enough to give them a chance. But where would they go? In the distance, she caught a glimpse of a faint flicker of light, dancing just beyond the depths of shadow. Maybe it was a way out. They had to take the chance. Stay here, she whispered fiercely, pushing the boy back gently. But he shook his head fiercely, shaking off any thought of separation. I'm not leaving you. The door shuddered again, the desperation behind it palpable. She could feel the shadows straining against the door, ready to burst through. Jenna, do something. A jolt of courage ignited in her chest, the kind that flares in moments of dire need. On three, she said, glancing into those dark, fear-filled eyes. We run for that light, no matter what. Okay. He whimpered, but grit took over his features. 1, 2, 3. Together, they darted from their alcove, rushing toward that flickering glow. Just as the door splintered open, a wave of darkness collapsed out, tendrils snaking forward. "Run!" she screamed, propelling them toward the light, breath hitching in their throats. Behind them, the darkness roared, a howl of fury that sent chills racing up Jenna's spine. Could they evade the shadows in time? Or was this just another trick? Hope mingled with dread as they bolted into the light's embrace, but shadows danced all around them, tightening their stranglehold. The light flickered. Would it shield them or lead to something far worse? Jenna and the boy raced into the blinding light, hearts pounding and terror driving them forward. The darkness roared behind them, an angry beast determined to reclaim its lost prey. Jenna didn't dare look back. It was now or never. "Keep going. Don't stop," she urged, feeling the boy right at her side, his small form a beacon of hope as they lunged forward. The light surrounding them pulsed like a heartbeat, pushing back the encroaching shadows. Jenna could feel the warmth wrapping around them, illuminating the hazy figure of what appeared to be an open doorway at the end of the glowing passage. "Here," she shouted, lunging for the door. It shined like a portal to salvation. They could hear echoes of dread roaring behind them, distorted whispers taunting them, promising revenge if they dared to escape. "We have to close it behind us." Without thinking, Jenna hurled the door shut as soon as they burst through. The familiar creak of wood resonated like a death knell, the violent crash of thunder that silenced the shadows. Panting, they leaned against the door, heartbeats slowing as they processed the sudden stillness. Jenna took a moment to glance around their new surroundings. It was a small, dimly lit room, a basement, perhaps cluttered with boxes and forgotten memories. "What just happened?" the boy whispered, breath trembling, wide eyes searching her face for answers. "I don't know," Jenna admitted softly, "but we made it for now." Yet even as she spoke, the shadows lingered at the edges of her mind. They had squeezed through the dark prison, but escape did not feel complete. The horrid weight of lingering fear settled like lead in her stomach. Suddenly, the door rattled violently, sending a chill down her spine. Mustering her courage, Jenna turned back to face it, heart racing. The sinister whispers had returned, clearer now, their voices muttering in a chilling chorus. "You can't hide. You can't escape." The sensations flooded back, the notes left on her car, the photographs, the shrine, but she had to keep the boy safe. He needed her now. Glancing around, she noticed a small window at the far end, but it was dark and barred. "We need to find a way out," Jenna asserted, her voice steady as she tried to emanate confidence. "Where's that light coming from?" the boy asked, pointing toward a faint glimmer seeping through the cracks of a nearby storage crate. "What if it's a trap?" she worried aloud, desire battling uncertainty. But deep down she felt that they needed to take the risk. "We won't know until we try." The boy nodded, determination brimming in his gaze, and together they started shifting the boxes to investigate the source of the light. They worked quickly, adrenaline fueling their actions as the shadows outside the door rumbled fiercely, claws raking against wood. Finally, they uncovered a torn canvas on the crate, and the light spilling from it revealed a dusty and faded map, marked with peculiar symbols. "This must lead somewhere. We need to follow it," Jenna exclaimed, feeling the electric current of possibility surge through her veins. Suddenly, the door burst open like a volcano erupting, shadows billowing forth, hungry for their chance. "We have to go now," Jenna shouted, snatching the boy's hand and dashing toward the map. The darkness swirled, a tempest summoned by their fear. It clawed at them, furious and ready to devour. But Jenna was no longer afraid. She would fight for every ounce of light left within her. They dashed through a narrow passage indicated on the map, the air thickening as they approached an exit. The whispers morphed into furious howls, disembodied voices crying out in anger. "Faster!" Jenna yelled, their feet pounding heavily against the earth, propelling them toward freedom that felt achingly close yet far. In that moment, they burst out into a clearing bathed in moonlight. Trees swayed gently, dwarfed by the silver glow that felt more like a promise than reality. The boy gasped, and they halted momentarily to drink in the beauty, a world far removed from the darkness that had bound them. But then she felt it. Again the cold slithering of shadows creeping at the edges of the clearing. The darkness wasn't done. It chased them relentlessly. "Where do we go?" The boy whimpered, looking around frantically. "Anywhere but here," Jenna responded, snatching up his hand. They had to keep moving. The darkness could not win. As they darted through the trees, Jenna's thoughts raced toward her children, toward safety, toward a future away from fear. No more shadows, no more shrines. Just as they reached the edge of the forest, Jenna glanced back, and what she saw filled her with both dread and hope. The shadowy figures paused at the tree line, writhing as if unable to cross into the silver light. They were trapped, caught in a realm they did not belong to. "Keep going," she exclaimed, rounding the last tree just as dawn began its gentle approach. The horizon glimmered with the hues of daybreak, colors vibrant and alive. Hand in hand, they staggered toward the glow that promised safety. The heavy hold of night receded behind them, and the boy smiled, a glimmer of innocence regained amid the chaos. "Did we make it?" he asked, looking up at Jenna with hope in his eyes. "I think we did," she whispered back, her own heart lifting. They had survived. They had faced their most terrifying fears and emerged into the light. And even as they stepped further away from the shadows, Jenna felt a flicker of determination spark inside her. There would be fires to extinguish, nightmares to confront, and families to protect. But today, they embraced the dawn, their future waiting to be rewritten, free from the darkness that had once enveloped them. "Let us go home," she said, pulling the boy close as they strolled toward the golden glow of a new day. And with that, freedom was no longer just a distant dream, it was their reality. As they walked toward the embrace of sunlight, Jenna felt a wave of relief crash over her. Though shadows might linger elsewhere, they had fought and won. Together. If you connected with Jenna's story, you need to subscribe now to catch every exclusive episode. Because, believe me, you don't want to miss what's next. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and show your support. And I mean it. Flood the comments section with all your reactions and theories because I love hearing from you, and your input matters so much. And don't wait even one more second, share this video with at least 5 friends who need to know how this tale ends. Only true fans like you understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.